They said Stalingrad would be over in a week. A quick push, a clean victory, one more city swallowed by the German advance. That's what the posters promised. That's what the officers repeated. But the soldiers on the ground, they knew the truth long before the historians wrote it down. Stalingrad wasn't a battle. It was a slow, grinding descent into a world where the rules of war stopped making sense. And for the men fighting in its streets, German and Soviet, the city felt alive, like it was swallowing people whole. A German infantryman stepping off the train in late summer 1942 felt something strange in the air before a single shot was fired. It wasn't fear exactly, it was pressure. Stalingrad was still a working city. Factories poured smoke into the sky. Workers were still welding steel, even as artillery thundered in the distance. Civilians moved through the streets like ghosts, mothers clutching children, men too old to fight carrying bags of whatever they could grab. It didn't look like a battlefield yet. It looked like a city trying to pretend life was still normal. But every soldier knew it wouldn't stay that way. German troops had been promised a smooth advance. They'd crushed everything in their path. The Soviets would break just like they always did, but the men noticed quickly. This time, the Red Army wasn't running. This time, the Soviets were digging in, block by block, house by house. And they were angry. Not disciplined, not elegant, angry. There's a difference you can feel immediately. The first real hint of what Stalingrad was came from the Volga River. German soldiers watched barges packed with Soviet troops crossing under constant fire. The Soviets weren't hiding from danger. They were rowing directly into it. No one on those boats expected to row back. A German private wrote home that he felt like the city wanted revenge. He didn't know on what, but he could feel the weight of something bigger than orders. For Soviet soldiers, the approach to Stalingrad felt even worse. Every crossing of the Volga felt like being delivered into the mouth of something unstoppable. The men could see the city burning from miles away. They could smell it before they stepped onto shore, burnt metal, blown concrete, the sharp sting of brick dust. Commanders told them the river was their wall, that Stalingrad could not fall, that this was the line between survival and collapse. But the soldiers could see how thin that line really was. The moment boots hit the riverbank, they realized the stories were true. Stalingrad wasn't a typical fight. It was a maze of torn buildings, collapsed streets, shattered factories, and endless hiding spots. Nothing was secure. You could hold a building for 5 minutes and lose it in 6. You could move 10 feet forward and lose 30 going back. The city felt rigged against anyone trying to survive in it. A German radio operator described it like fighting inside a crushed machine. You couldn't trust your own senses. The Soviets didn't fight in straight lines. They attacked from drains, basements, holes blasted through walls. They hid under floors, inside chimneys, behind piles of scrap. A squad could disappear into a single room and reappear behind you. For German soldiers, the nightmare wasn't just the enemy. It was the terrain itself. You could hear footsteps echoing but not know if they were above you or below you. You could see figures moving through dust clouds but not know if they were silhouettes or real enemies. You could climb a staircase and realize too late the steps were rigged to collapse. For Soviet troops, the fear wasn't the Germans. It was time. Every hour, the Germans pushed deeper. Every day, another building fell. Civilians disappeared. Food grew scarce, ammunition ran out. The famous order, "Not one step back," wasn't a slogan, it was a sentence. Soldiers caught retreating could be punished on the spot. Many weren't retreating out of fear of the Germans, they were retreating out of fear of their own commanders. No one had enough of anything. Germans ran out of water, Soviets ran out of everything. Yet both sides kept fighting. Imagine standing inside a ruined apartment block, your rifle shaking in your hands because you've barely slept in 4 days. You can hear German boots scraping against broken bricks somewhere nearby, but it's impossible to know where. The air is thick with dust after another artillery strike, so thick you taste it like sand. Someone coughs beside you, but it doesn't sound like one of your men, and suddenly every shadow feels alive. Now switch view. Imagine being a German grenadier climbing over a collapsed tram line. You know the Soviet snipers are here somewhere. They always are. You can feel eyes on your back. Your friend ahead of you ducks behind an overturned cart and tells you to move slow. You try to, but your legs shake from fatigue. You hear rustling, you freeze, you blink, and one of your squad mates is down, taken out, before you even heard the shot. This wasn't two armies fighting. It was thousands of individual duels happening at once. The factories, Red October, Tractor Factory, Barricadi, felt like entire cities within a city. Germans described them as metal jungles. Soviet soldiers said they felt like the belly of a dying beast. You'd be crawling over slag piles and torn steel, while machine parts still hung from broken cranes above you. The ground was soaked in grease and dirt. Sometimes you'd slip on something and pray it was just mud. Inside these factories, soldiers fought over meters, not streets, not blocks, meters. A rusted machine could become a fortress. A half-collapsed wall could become the front line for 2 days. Men who'd never spoken to each other fought over distances so small they could hear each other breathing. And then winter arrived. The soldiers felt it before they saw it. A thin sheet of frost on everything. Rifle bolts sticking, water freezing inside canteens. At first, the snow looked almost peaceful. Then it became the enemy. Some German soldiers wore thin summer uniforms because the high command assumed they'd take the city before winter. They didn't. And the cold didn't just freeze soldiers, it froze decisions. It froze movement. It froze hope. Soviet troops were used to bitter winters, but even they weren't ready for what was coming. The temperature sank so fast that exposed fingers burned with frostbite in minutes. You could press your hand against a wall and feel ice forming beneath your palm. But something changed with the winter. German soldiers noticed fewer Soviet attacks in the streets and more strange movements in the distance. Large groups of Soviet forces forming far beyond the city. The horizon looked alive with activity. Rumors spread among German troops. Reinforcements, reserves, a counterattack. Then they found out. Operation Uranus, the Soviet plan to encircle the entire German 6th Army. German soldiers woke up to distant rumbling and thought it was normal artillery. Then they realized the sound wasn't stopping. It was getting louder. It was tanks, dozens, then hundreds. Not aiming at the city, aiming around it. For a German soldier inside Stalingrad, it felt like watching the sky close. Suddenly, the radios went quiet. Supplies stopped coming. Letters stopped arriving. There was no way out. For Soviet troops still inside, morale flipped instantly. The men who had been clinging to trenches and ruins for months felt something they hadn't felt since the battle began: momentum. They pushed harder. They fought with a new kind of energy. Not because the city was saved yet, but because they felt the Germans' confidence break. Inside the pocket, the German perspective turned desperate. Food rations dropped to almost nothing. Horses were eaten, then anything edible. Ammunition was low, medical supplies were gone. Frostbite took more soldiers than combat. The men wrote home that the city felt like a giant freezer full of echoes. Meanwhile, Soviet soldiers finally had the upper hand. But victory didn't feel clean. It never does. Stalingrad wasn't a glorious triumph to them. It was survival with a cost they couldn't calculate. Every building reclaimed revealed the price of the fight. Every step forward came with the memory of someone who didn't make it. By the end, neither side felt human anymore. German soldiers trapped in the ruins described the final days as moving through a dream where everything was grey. Soviet soldiers marching through the last pockets of resistance said the city didn't even smell like a city anymore. It smelled like dust, smoke, and cold metal. When the final surrender came, it didn't feel like victory to the men standing in the rubble. It felt like waking up from a nightmare and realizing the world outside was colder than the dream. For the soldiers, Stalingrad wasn't about borders or ideology. It wasn't about Hitler or Stalin. It wasn't about strategy. It was about surviving another hour, another night, another freezing morning. Stalingrad was the moment thousands of soldiers learned what war really was. Not glory, not patriotism, not heroism, just endurance, just suffering, just the brutal reminder that ordinary people pay the price for decisions made far above them. And when the snow finally settled, both sides were left with the same thought. No one should ever have to see a place like this again. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the soldier's perspective, make sure you hit subscribe. Your support genuinely pushes these videos further. And tell me, what battle, moment, or perspective do you want to see next?